Because it is good to be with you once again, brothers and sisters, and all praises to the Most High. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio Podcasting, out of Little Rock, Arkansas, to the true saints of the Most High God. Happy Sabbath day to you, brothers and sisters. It is the seventh day Sabbath, the day that the Lord gave the true children of Israel, the day of rest, the day of reading, the day of learning, the day in which the Lord gave for a delight. Now, before we begin in 2 Peter 1, verse 19, we just wanted to address our subscribers and all that support us. We realize that we have not been posting our 10-minute videos. And there's a lot of people that like those 10-minute videos because they were packed with chapters and verses. Good learning experience for the day. We haven't been doing them, but we're going to bring them back. We decided to do more shorts for now, and our shorts are even 3 minutes. We're not doing 1-minute shorts anymore. We're doing 3-minute shorts, and those are packed with chapters and verses. We're doing that because it has doubled our subscriber count. It has also more than doubled our viewership. So we're trying to bring more people into the truth, but still we're not going to rob the sheep that we already have. So we're going to be bringing those 10-minute podcast episodes back daily as we used to do them. Now, let's begin in 2 Peter 1:19. The reason why I wanted to begin here is because where we're going in the book of Acts chapter 10. I would think, it's about Cornelius. And I think going into Acts 11 will better suit us in this podcast episode on the Sabbath day. But before I begin in there, the book of Acts, we got to read 2 Peter 1:19. So let's read. Peter writes, "We have also a more sure word of prophecy, okay? Whereunto ye do well that ye take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place." So, prophecy, you're to take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place. Light that shineth in a dark place. Let's go back to Romans 2. I want to show you that light. Who would that light be? Romans 2. Verse 17. And we're going to start in verse 17 because that's where we're going to start. But I want you to see this. Romans 2:17, "Behold, thou art called a Jew and restest in the law," because the rest is in the law. The rest of God was in the law. You see it right here. "And makest thy boast of God." Now you see it says, "Behold, thou art called a Jew." Paul was not calling Caucasian Romans Jews. He wasn't. When you go back and you understand in the book of Acts, chapter 22 and 3, where Paul writes, "I am verily a man which am a Jew born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day." So Paul was a Jew born amongst Romans. He was born amongst the Romans. Born. So since he was born amongst Romans, what did that make him? You all know where I'm going. It says this, "And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned?" Look at that. Paul was a Roman. But wait a minute. Verse 3. "I am verily a man which am a Jew, born amongst Romans." So since Paul was born amongst Romans, what did that make him? Verse 25. "And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? Why did Paul note that he was a Roman? Because he was a Jew born in Rome. And since he was a Jew born in Rome, it gave him citizenship to be called a Roman. So Paul was a Jew called a Roman because he had citizenship. That's why when you go back to Acts 2 proves the same thing. At the day of Pentecost, when the Pentecost came, remember, I'm just going to stop right here. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. So this is the Pentecost. Now, who's coming to the Pentecost? And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now, who came to the Pentecost? Jews. No other race came to the Pentecost. That's the first thing you have to understand. No other race came to the Pentecost but Jews. New Testament, the book of Acts. So when we drop down to verse 8, it is written, and how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born. Wherein who was born? Who is the we? Who is the we? We're going to read this again. And how hear we every man in our own tongue where we were born. Where who was born? Who was the we? Verse 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. So when it's Jews out of every nation under heaven, going back to verse 8, and how hear we, the Jews, every man in our own tongue wherein we were born. Born where? In other places, like Paul was. Paul was a Jew born in amongst Romans, making him a Roman. But pay attention. It's gonna state every place where these Jews were from. Parthians and Medes and Elamites and dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia. Look at this. Phrygia and Pamphylia and Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome. These Jews that came out of every nation under heaven, in verse 10, were strangers of Rome, meaning they were Roman citizens because of what? Citizenship. They were born there. They were Jews born in Rome, making them Romans. That's why it says, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes. It's telling you in these verses, they were Jews, but they were born in Rome, making them Romans. That's why when you look back at Romans 2, that's why you see this. And they have you think that Paul is writing to a multi-ethnic group. He's not writing to a multi-ethnic group. The Romans he's writing to were the Jews there. That's why it says, behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God. Boast of God. Now look at this. And knowest his will, and approvest the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. And art confident that thou thyself art a guide of the blind. So those that are instructed out of the law are a guide to the blind. Those that are instructed out of the law are not the blind. They're the guides to the blind. A light of them which sat in darkness. So those that are instructed out of the law are a light. Again, brothers and sisters, you got to pay attention to what you're reading. Those that are instructed out of the law are the light. They're the light of them which sit in darkness. So those that are instructed out of the law are the light. They're the light. So we go back. I'm sure I showed you that for a reason. We go back to 2 Peter. Peter is saying the same thing. That's why he says, we have also a more sure word of prophecy. Prophecy is the law. We're going to show you it's the law. We're going to show you it's the law. Then we're going to go back up. Knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. Watch. What? For the prophecy came not in old time. That's showing you right here that prophecy is the Old Testament, which is the law. Prophecy is the law. For prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. So prophecy was the law. Go back up to verse 19. Look at this. We have also a more sure word of prophecy, the law, whereunto ye do well to take heed. Take heed of the law, as unto a light. What makes you a light? Prophecy, the law. That's why it says, unto a light that shineth in a dark place. Those that are instructed out of the law, those that take heed to prophecy, which is the law, are the light. We that teach and keep the law in this dark world are the light. Until the day dawn. Until that day dawn, and the day star arises in your minds. So one thing you have to understand is, brothers and sisters, prophecy is key to understanding certain things, especially where we're about to go now. The book of Acts 10. Now, I'm not going to be out in the book of Acts 10. I'm going to start in Acts 10 because I want you to see something. The book of Acts chapter 10 in verse 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man. Stop. A devout. What makes you devout? What makes you devout? Acts 22. Let's look at that. Acts 22 and 12. Devout now. A devout man. Watch this. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law. A devout man was a lawkeeper. A devout man was a lawkeeper. So right now, automatically we see that Cornelius is a lawkeeper. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there. So Ananias, a devout man according to the law. That is how you're devout, according to the law. So when we go back to Acts 10. Acts 10, verse 2. A devout man, he kept the law, and one that feareth God with all his house. So he was a devout man, according to the law, and one that feared God with all his house. So he feared God with all his house. His whole house feared God, the servants as well. This is key, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. So the first thing we want to do is we want to show you this. We want to show you this. Was there ever any time another nation can pray to the God of Israel? Because this is strange. You got to look at the details. The Christians say that this man is another nation. He's not Israel. But this man is praying. If this man, which is not of Israel, is praying to the God of Israel, that's off. That's way off. Let us show you the book of Isaiah. See, there's no history of that. Another nation praying to the God of Israel. Let me show you what they did, according to the book. Isaiah 44, verse 15. Then shall it be for a man to burn, for he will take thereof and warm himself. Yea, he kindleth it and breaketh bread. Yea, he maketh a god, and worshipeth it. He maketh it a graven image and falleth down thereto. So he maketh a god, and he worshipeth it. He maketh a god. Pay attention. Pay a close attention. He burneth part thereof in the fire. With part thereof he eateth flesh. He roasteth roast. Is satisfied, yea, he warmeth himself, and saith, Aha, I am warm. I have seen fire. Look at this. And the residue thereof he maketh a god. He maketh a god, even his graven image. He falleth down unto it, and worshipeth it, and prayeth unto it. So a Gentile prayed to an idol. He didn't pray to God. He prayed to his own idol. Other nations never prayed to the God of Israel. For what? They, according to chapter and verse, nations that had not the law or the covenant with God were praying to idols, not the God of Israel. This is what you're reading. There's no history of another nation praying to the God of Israel. Rare. He falleth down unto it, and worshipeth it, and prayeth unto it, and saith, Deliver me, for thou art my God. These are what the nations that are outside of Israel do. They pray to gods they make. Well, let's go a chapter over. Let's go a chapter over. Isaiah 45. Look at this. Isaiah 45:19. I have not spoken in secret in a dark place of the earth, and said not unto the seed of Jacob, Seek ye me in vain. I, the Lord, speak righteousness. I declare things that are right. Look at this. Assemble yourselves and come. Draw near together, ye that are escaped of the nations. That would be Israel. Pay attention. They have no knowledge. They set up the wood of their graven image, and pray unto a God that cannot save. See, the Gentiles, when they pray to an idol, not to the true God. They pray to an idol, not to the true God. But then Christians would think, let's go back to Acts. Acts 10. I don't want you to get away from the thought. Acts 10. A devout man, and one that feareth God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people, and prayed to God always. So this particular man named Cornelius kept the law and prayed unto the God of Israel. But what we want you to know, this is why we wanted to start in verse 10. I mean chapter 10. I'm sorry. Brothers and sisters, I'm everywhere today. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do a podcast episode, but the work has to continue. I was everywhere today. On the Sabbath, of course. My mind has been going. That's why I'm jittery. But he was devout according to the law, feared God with his house, gave much alms to the people, and prayed to God always. So this man, being another nation, was able to pray to the God of Israel. Unheard of, according to prophecy in the Old Testament. But remember now, let's go to chapter 11. I want to go to chapter 11 because I want to go on and get this started. Because Cornelius was called something else in the book of Acts chapter 11 verse 1. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. The Gentiles. So Cornelius, according to Acts chapter 11 verse 1, was a Gentile. See, I'm going back and forth to Acts chapter 10 and 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band. So this is about Cornelius. So when we go back, watch this. Cornelius is going to be noted as a Gentile. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. So here's where the Christians say, see, Cornelius was a Gentile. But now, again, we're going back to Romans. See, for all it's worth, we know that the Christians have nothing. If they had to stand toe to toe with us on this, it won't be long. Romans 9:3, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh. Flesh. Who are Israelites. I know when I read to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises, I understand that part. I can take you step by step through that. I want you to see, brothers and sisters, that Paul's brethren was his kinsman. There's no other definition, no other understanding for brethren than your own people. Christians cannot come up with a verse that says different. We guarantee you. Your brethren was your own people. And so if Paul's brethren, his kinsmen, were Israelites, it doesn't matter where they are, whether they're in Corinth, whether they're in Ephesus, whether they're in Colossus, whether they're in Philippi. When Paul uses the term brethren, those are Israelites in those places. Sorry, Christians, nothing you can do to discredit that. Nothing you can do to debunk that. So in Corinth, 1 Corinthians 12, that's why we read this to you every time. You got to understand, what the Christians have done is they have defined Gentiles as something else. But we know that what the book says is what counts. Now, Paul is writing to his brethren in Corinth. Brethren. Now, concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles. Look at that. Carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Look at that. How could Paul's own family be Gentiles again? Because of idolatry. What made you a Gentile was you were an idolater. These Christians, they have done a big number on what they truly want you to believe. We're back here. I want to read this with you. Zondervan's, the Gruden's, Complete Concordance, Old and New Testament. This book was basically in circulation in the 1940s. 50s and 60s. This is an old book. And you see the word Gentile. Gentile. It says, the Hebrews called the Gentiles by the general name of Goyim, which signifies the nations that have not received the faith or the law of God. So they know that the Goyim, they didn't receive the law. Pay attention. All who are not Jews and uncircumcised are comprised under the word Goyim. Those who were converted and embraced Judaism, they call proselytes. The Apostle Paul generally includes all Gentiles under the name of Greeks. No, he didn't. That's something they made up. But you can see how it works when it comes to Gentile. all who are not Jews and uncircumcised, meaning there was another group that could be a Gentile. That's why it says and uncircumcised, or who are not Jews and circumcised. So if you were not circumcised, you were a Gentile. This is what this book is saying. All who are not Jews and uncircumcised. So if you were not a Jew according to them or circumcised, you were a Gentile. Now, let's look, pay attention to this now. Let's go, because now you see here that Paul's brethren, they were Gentiles because of idolatry. You see this, his brethren, meaning Israelites were Gentiles in idolatry. But also, again, in Ephesians 2, there's no way for the Christians to get around this. Ephesians 2, verse 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. Do you see that? Gentiles and Gentile. The Hebrews call the Gentiles by the general name of Goyim, which signifies the nations that have not received the faith or the law of God. All who are not Jews and uncircumcised. Stop. If you're not, they tried to put it to where you could be a little confused. But if you read it carefully, all who are not Jews and uncircumcised, the not also applies to circumcised. So a Gentile could be a uncircumcised man. That's why it's mentioned here. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. So the uncircumcision were the Gentiles. So when I go to Acts 15, see, Christians, they don't realize that we slow this down. Acts 15:1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren. The brethren is their own people. Can't change the definition. Can't change the understanding what the book gives. The book has already given that. So the Jews taught the brethren, their own men, in other places, and says, except ye be circumcised, meaning that there were uncircumcised Jews among the nations. And if you were uncircumcised, the Hebrews call the Gentiles by the general name of Goyim, which signifies the nations that have not received the faith nor the law of God. All who are not Jews and not circumcised, that not applies to circumcised, are comprised under the word Goyim, which are Gentiles. Anybody could be a Gentile. It's just you can't just say they're non-Jews. Anyone could go under the word Gentile. So you can see this clearly. So there were uncircumcised Jews among the nations. So going back, hold on. Let's go back to Ephesians 2, because we just want you to see this. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11. We're letting you know this. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. The Gentiles or the uncircumcision. So when it says, you were in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which was called the circumcision were the Jews. So Paul is letting them know that you were being called Gentiles by the Jews. You were being called Gentiles by the Jews. Where is that at? The book of John 7:35. John 7:35. Watch this. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go? Then said the Jews. Who are the Jews? Circumcision. Then said the circumcision among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? So the Jews were calling the dispersed Israelites among the nations Gentiles. This is what Paul meant in Ephesians 2:11. Easy. When they lock you in on having you think that the Gentile is a non-Jew only, that's wrong. We already know. So you got to question. You have to question. You have to question yourself on it. Stick with us, brothers and sisters. We have to take a short break. We'll be right back. Thanks for hanging with us, brothers and sisters. Had to make a move then. But you can see here that the circumcision called the dispersed among the Gentiles, which were Israelites, Gentiles. This is what Ephesians 2:11 is talking about. And we know those, Ezekiel 36. We're going to show you who's dispersed among the Gentiles. Ezekiel 36, real quick, just to give you a verse. Ezekiel 36, we're going to just go to the verse and we're going to move on. Because we're just going to show you, this is concerning Israel. Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own way and by their own doings. Their way was before me as the uncleanness of a removed woman. So when we drop down to verse 19, and I scattered them among the Gentiles, and they were dispersed through the countries. The countries were the Gentiles. So Israelites were dispersed among the Gentiles. See that? According to their way and according to their doings, I judged them. So the judgment for sin, idolatry, uncleanness, was Israelites were dispersed among the Gentiles. Christians can do nothing about this. The dispersed among the heathen, which are the Gentiles, were Israelites. It's right there. Right there. No way around it. So, going back to John 7:35, reading it real quick and go. In John 7:35, then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed? Those dispersed were Israelites among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles. Why did the Jews call the dispersed of Israel Gentiles? Let's go right back. 1 Corinthians. This is why. 1 Corinthians 12. 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, Paul's brethren is his own people. I will not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. What made you a Gentile as an Israelite was idolatry. That's why it says, you were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols. Idolatry caused them to worship other gods, which made them Gentiles. The testimony is there. So when we go back to Ephesians, you got to get what a Gentile is straight up. I'm going to do this again. Let me see if I can find this. It's been a while since I went here, but hopefully I can find this in my archives. Let me see. Give me just a second, if you will. All right. I want to show you this. Here we see the term heathen. Now, heathen and Gentile are the same. Paul knew it. I'm going to show you, because see, some people say, well, heathen is a little bit different definition than Gentile. No, it's not. We're going to show you right now. Let's go back to the Bible. Let's go to the book of Romans. We're going to show you this. Book of Romans. Then we're going to come back to 1 Corinthians. The book of Romans, chapter 15. I want to make sure you see this. The book of Romans 15 and 10. And again he saith, rejoice ye Gentiles with his people. But I want you to read this. And again, praise the Lord, all ye Gentiles, and laud him, all ye people. That's found in Psalms 1. We're going to go to Psalms 117. Psalms 117, verse 1. Praise the Lord, all ye nations. Paul said Gentiles, but it really was nations, because that's what nations are, Gentiles. This is one way you defined it. Praise him, all ye people. So you can see this without a doubt. Easy. Can't be overlooked. But just seeing in verse 9, watch this. Let's go back. It's another way you can see this. Romans 15. I just wanted to show you that Gentiles could also mean nations, but also something else. Back to Romans 15. In verse 9. I'm going to read verse 9 this time, because that's what I should have read at first. And it says, and that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy, as it is written. It's written, for this cause I will confess thee among the Gentiles, and sing unto thy name. Now, we're going to go to where Paul was quoting. But you're going to see another word besides the Gentiles where we're going. The book of Psalms. The book of Psalms, chapter 18. Remember now, before we get to Psalms 18, I want to read this again. I want you to be clear about it. It says, as it is written, for this cause I will confess thee among the Gentiles, and sing unto thy name. Confess thee among the Gentiles. But the Gentiles are going to be called something different when we go to the book of Psalms. You're going to see. Book of Psalms, chapter 18, verse 49. Here's what Paul was quoting. Therefore will I give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen. See, David writes heathen. Heathen. This is what he's quoting, Psalms 18:49. Therefore I will give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen. Paul wrote Gentiles in Romans 15:9. And sing praises unto thy name. So heathen and Gentiles mean the same thing. It's no different. The Christians know this. So when we go, I want you to look very carefully at, let's go back. Remember, this is what he's quoting. Let's go back to Romans, because I want you to get this clearly. Sorry about that, brothers and sisters. Hit a quick key. Oh, did it again. Let's go back to the Bible. All right, sorry about that. We're going back to the book of Romans. These quick keys get me. I don't understand. I can't use them. They hurt me. The book of Romans 15:9. And that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy, as it is written, for this cause I will confess to thee, among the Gentiles. They were called the heathen in Psalms 18:49. And sing unto thy name. So the Gentiles and the heathen were the same. So when we go to heathen, I want to look at heathen. Heathen. Same as Gentiles. Most frequently, this word merely means the other nations as distinguished from the Hebrews. Okay, let's see. Without intending any reference to religion. But, watch this. It generally means idolaters. That's what heathens were. Idolaters. Gentiles were idolaters. Had nothing to do with non-Jew, non-Israel. Heathen, Gentiles, but it generally means idolaters. Let's go. Wait. It generally means idolaters. We're going to come back to this. Again, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I will not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. So a Gentile was an idolater, just like it says here. When we drop down to the middle, we're just going to read the top. Most frequently means it's been changed. Most frequently, this word merely means the other nations. That's what they wanted you to think. Most frequently, they wanted the heathen, which were the Gentiles, to be the other nations, as distinguished from the Hebrews. They tried to distinct them. They made that the church, so-called, without intending any references to religion. But it generally means idolater. A heathen and a Gentile was an idolater. The revision very frequently substitute the word nations for heathen. They did that. The so-called Edomites went in and says, no, the heathen means the other nations. But according to its original meaning, but it generally means idolaters. Where'd they get that from? 1 Corinthians 12:1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, Paul's own people, I will not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. What made them Gentiles? Idolatry. And this is where they got it from when they said, but it generally means idolaters. Because a Gentile was an idolater. That's all it was. That's why when we go watch. That's why when we go back to Ephesians 2. Watch. Verse 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. So notice what he said. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, in the flesh, in the flesh, in the flesh. 1 Peter 4. I go back over these frequently. 1 Peter 4 and 2. We'll do it like this. We'll read verse 1 just for sound. For as much then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh, to the lust of men, to the lust of men, other nations, but to the will of God. Pay attention. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. We as Israelites wrought the will or worked the will of the Gentiles. What was the will of the Gentiles? When we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. When they were in the flesh, which was in the lust of men, they were in idolatry. Most frequently, this word merely means the other nations, as distinguished from the Hebrews, without intending any reference to religion. This is their change, but it generally means idolaters. Idolaters. So, when they wrought the will of the Gentiles here, it was idolatry. So, in their flesh, they were idolaters. Idolaters. You can't take idolatry out the picture. That's why in Ephesians 2 again. Ephesians 2, verse 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. See, Gentiles in the flesh mean they were in idolatry. Sin. This is the verse that proves, or verses that prove, that idolaters were Gentiles. So let's go back to Acts 11. Acts 11, verse 1. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles, now who would these Gentiles be? Would these Gentiles be other nations, other people, or Israelites in idolatry? That's the first thing you got to look at. Which ones? Will they be other nations that never received the law, that never received the faith, coming into the Judean faith, or are they Jews, partly northern kingdom among the nations in idolatry? Who are these Gentiles really? You're going to see who they are. Watch this. Let's drop down, because here's the Christians. Here they go. I want to drop down to verse 7. And I heard a voice saying unto me, Arise, Peter, slay and eat. He's reacting Acts 10. This is reenactment of Acts 10. He's rehearsing the matter, I should say. And I said, Not so, Lord, for nothing common or unclean hath at any time entered into my mouth. So nothing common or unclean has entered into my mouth. Nothing common or unclean. Okay? Now watch this. But the voice answered me again from heaven, What God hath cleansed. Again, what God has cleansed, that call not common. Now, here's where prophecy comes into play. The Bible said what God hath cleansed, meaning they were already cleansed. They were already cleansed. Now, in order for this not to be a private interpretation, you would have to have prophecy. And the question would be, who was prophesied to be cleansed? This is a question you have to ask yourself. Who fit this prophecy? Because when it comes down to the Gentiles, in verse 1, the Gentiles that receive the word of God, these Gentiles, when you go back, look. But the voice answered me again from heaven, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. What God hath cleansed. So again, we need prophecy to see who he was going to cleanse. And from what? Know the meaning of these things. So I want to start off in Ezekiel 36. Let's go back to Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel 36. We're going to start in verse 24. Pay attention. For I will take you from among the Gentiles and gather you out of all the countries and will bring you into your own land. Now, this cannot happen without first us gathering the people together. That's why it says in Zephaniah 2. That's why it says in Zephaniah 2 in verse 1. See, we have to do something first. Zephaniah 2 and 1. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired, before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. So we're to gather ourselves together. The nation that is not desired. It's talking about Israel now. So the gathering doesn't just start when Christ returns to gather us. We as apostles, prophets, have to gather the people together to the law to be gathered by Christ. So I want you to look at this. I want you to look at how God does this. Back to the book of Ezekiel. How this is brilliant, the way he does prophecy. Ezekiel 36:24. And I will take you from among the Gentiles, the heathen, and gather you out of all countries and bring you to your own land. And I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. What made you a Gentile? Idolatry. See who was going to be cleansed from idolatry? Israelites. I will cleanse you. If he has to cleanse Israel, what would that make them? Unclean. Y'all got to think along the lines of common sense. If God, let's watch this. Let's go to Ezekiel 37. Let's go a chapter over. If God has to cleanse Israel, what would that make them? The unclean. If he has to cleanse them. The book of Ezekiel 37:22. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be king to them all. And they shall and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. So we're not going to be two kingdoms. He's going to make the two kingdoms one, northern and southern. Neither shall they defile themselves anymore with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of their dwelling places, wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their God. See, there has to be a cleansing of his people. So if God has to cleanse his people, that makes them unclean. If God has to cleanse his people, that would make them the unclean. That's why it said in the book of Acts. Look at this now, Acts 11. Acts 11. Pay attention now. Acts 11. Wait, hold. Let me go up. Go back up. Verse 8. But I said, not so, Lord, for nothing common or unclean hath at any time entered into my mouth. Who with these? You got to pay attention to how it works, because back up to verse 6. This is where I should have started. Upon the which, when I had fastened my eyes, I considered and saw 4-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. Look at this. And I heard a voice saying unto me, Arise, Peter, slay and eat, slay and eat. And I said, Not so, Lord, for nothing common or unclean hath at any time entered into my mouth. Unclean now. But the voice answered me again from heaven, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. What God has cleansed. Well, according to prophecy, who was he supposed to cleanse? Israel. And one of the things, let's go back to Ezekiel. Ezekiel, I want to read this again. And one of the things he was supposed to cleanse Israelites from was this. Then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Oh, idols. 1 Corinthians 12. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I will not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Look at that, idols. Idols. What made you a Gentile? Paul's brethren now. Gentiles because of idolatry. Serving other gods, serving idols, made Paul's brethren Gentiles. Look. Idolatry. And what does it say in Ezekiel 36? Ezekiel 36. Let's go right back. Remember, Gentiles carried away to these dumb idols. They were Gentiles. Paul's brethren were Gentiles because of idolatry. Going back to Ezekiel 36, verse 25 one more time. Then I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. I will cleanse you. When he says, I'm going to cleanse you from your idols, what was he going to do? He was going to cleanse the Israelites in idolatry. And anything that was associated with idols was Gentiles. This is how we know who he's going to cleanse. He's going to cleanse us. There would be a time that God would cleanse us from idolatry. And if you were in idolatry, you were a Gentile. This is what we're getting you to see. The Gentiles that he was going to cleanse from idolatry was Israelites. There's no prophecy of him cleansing other nations. No prophecy at all. That's why I say Christians do things without prophecy. Jeremiah. Watch this, Jeremiah 33. You got to have prophecy to see if what you're teaching in the New Testament is correct. The book of Jeremiah 33, verse 7. And I will cause the captivity of Judah and the captivity of Israel, both kingdoms, to return, and will build them as at the first. Look at this. And I will cleanse them from all their sin. See, who's being cleansed? I will cleanse them from their iniquity, whereby they have sinned against me, and will pardon all their iniquities, forgive, whereby they have sinned, and whereby they have transgressed against me. The only way, let me say it like this. Prophecy is key. That's why we took you back to 2 Peter 1:19 through 21. Because the prophecy is a sure word. And if Christians are not using prophecy concerning Cornelius, they're making it up. Private interpretation. The only ones that were going to be cleansed from sin, idolatry, would be the Israelites that were born in other nations, serving their gods, making them Gentiles. So when we go back to Acts 11, Acts 11, verse 9. But the voice answered me again from heaven, what God has cleansed, that call not thou common. Can you find a verse that can support the theory of other nations being cleansed? No. This lets you know. That's why when we go up to Gentiles, you need to understand Gentiles can carry the word it carries with idolatry. It's very important. This is very, very important when you're looking at chapter and verse. Because again, there's no way Christians can get around it. Paul's brethren were Gentiles because of idolatry. Israelites in their flesh, born in other nations, were Gentiles because of idolatry. Straight up. You can't get around it. So if you're gonna go to Acts 10 or Acts 11 and you're gonna start talking about Cornelius, the one thing you got to do. See, we know he's a Gentile. We're gonna know he's a Gentile, but when it comes down to the prophecy of who God hath cleansed, you will not find other nations being cleansed. The Gentiles he was cleansing was Israelites in idolatry. That's why we know Cornelius was an Israelite. Because when it says what God has cleansed, how did he cleanse them? We read it. But let's read it again. What I have cleansed. Book of Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel 36 and verse 25. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. That is what the Gentiles in Acts chapter 11, those Gentiles, they were to be cleansed from idolatry. Which were those Gentiles was in idolatry? Israelites born in other nations. Can't get away from it. The idols made them Gentiles. And I will cleanse you. This is how it is. Same thing. They were being cleansed. Watch this. I'm going to go to the point. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols. Idolatry, which made them Gentiles, nor their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of their dwelling places, wherein they have sinned in idolatry. And I will cleanse them. Meaning that Israelites were the unclean. If God has to cleanse them, they were the unclean. Mentioned in Acts chapter 11 and 10. These were the unclean he was going to cleanse. Note, and will cleanse them, meaning they were unclean before he cleansed them. Christianity should know this. Before we could be his people again, we have to be cleansed. From what? Sin, idolatry. So I'm straight up. Back to the point. Jeremiah 33, verse 8. And I will cleanse them. If God has to cleanse Israel, that means they were the unclean. They were the unclean. That's why, look at the verse. We do things by precept. We show you, if you want to see a verse, let's look at this verse. Isaiah 52, verse 1. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. For henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised, which is the Gentile, and the unclean. See, the uncircumcised was what? Look, the uncircumcised. Ephesians 2. See, this is why, brothers and sisters, we give you Bible. Ephesians 2. Remember, the uncircumcised and unclean. What was the uncircumcised according to Paul? Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision. The uncircumcised was the Gentile. See? Gentiles in the flesh who are called uncircumcision. So the Gentiles and uncircumcision meant the same. The uncircumcision were Gentiles. The Gentiles was the uncircumcision. So when we go back to Isaiah 52, Isaiah 52, verse 1. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy garments, O Jerusalem. Okay. The holy city. For henceforth there shall no more come into thee the uncircumcised, which is the Gentile, and the unclean. Because the Gentiles, they were the unclean, right? The uncircumcised was considered the unclean, and the uncircumcised were Gentiles, and they were unclean. We know what we're talking about. So, if God, Jeremiah, you guys have to use common sense. Common sense is going to put everything in perspective. Jeremiah 33 and 8, I will cleanse them from all their sin. Who is he going to cleanse? Israel. If he has to cleanse them, they were the unclean. And the unclean was the Gentile. There's no way around it. Whereby they have sinned against me, and I will pardon all their iniquities whereby they have sinned, and whereby they have transgressed against me. So if the Israelites were the unclean had the same meaning as Gentile. And you see it right here in Acts 11. That's why you got to take your time. Acts 11 verse 1. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles in verse 1, but I said, not so, Lord, for I have for nothing common or unclean hath at any time entered into my mouth. But the voice answered me again from heaven, what God hath cleansed. So these Gentiles here, God cleansed. And according to the Bible, which were the Gentiles God cleansed? Israelites scattered among the nations, making Cornelius an Israelite. This is what this is talking about. Cornelius was one that had been taught by the brethren. And he repented, and he was a man of the law. He kept the law because he was devout. But the point that was made in the vision was that God was cleansing Gentiles. How? From sin. But which Gentiles was he cleansing from sin? Scattered Israelites. Meaning Cornelius was an Israelite. Christians can argue about this all day, but they have no verse to prove who God is going to cleanse. And we already know, 2 Chronicles, watch this, 2 Chronicles, and there's history behind us. Because we can show you Israelites were unclean and why. 2 Chronicles 30. 2 Chronicles 30. Verse 17. For there were many in the congregation that were not sanctified. Therefore the Levites had the charge of killing the Passover for everyone that was not clean. Not clean, which means unclean, to sanctify them unto the Lord. For the multitude of the people, indeed even many of Ephraim, Israel, and Manasseh, Israel, Issachar, Israel, and Zebulun had not cleansed themselves, meaning there were Israelites in times past that were unclean. What made them unclean? Sin, idolatry. Yet did they eat the Passover otherwise than it was written. And I'm going to explain that. They ate the Passover anyway, otherwise. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, the good Lord pardon every one. Forgive their sin, Lord. Even though they're unclean, forgive their sin. That prepareth his heart to seek God. That prepareth his heart to seek God. So he prayed for these Israelites that were unclean. He prayed for these Israelites that were unclean, that prepareth his heart to seek God. That prepareth his heart. What does it mean to seek God? If you're seeking God, what does that mean? The book of Psalms 119. 119. What does it mean to seek God? Psalms 119 and 1. Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are they that keep his testimonies, and that seek him with the whole heart. To seek the Lord was to keep his testimonies. Again, to seek him with the whole heart was to keep his testimonies. That's why it says in 1 Chronicles 28, when you're seeking God, there's something you got to do. 1 Chronicles 28. In verse 8. Now therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the congregation of the Lord, in the audience of our God, keep and seek for all the commandments of the Lord your God, that ye may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance for your children after you forever. So when you were keeping and seeking the Lord, it was by keeping his commandments. So we can see when we go back to 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 30. 2 Chronicles chapter 30 verse. Watch this, verse 19. That prepareth his heart to seek God. Let's keep the law. That prepareth his heart to seek God, the Lord God of his fathers. Though he be not cleansed, he's unclean, an Israelite is unclean, according to the purification of the sanctuary. Now, when it says according to the purification of the sanctuary, it's talking about this, the book of Matthew. See, there was another way they were supposed to be cleansed. That's why it says according to the purification of the sanctuary, Matthew 8. Matthew 8, verse 3. I'm just going to start in verse 3. Look at this. And the Messiah put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean, because there were Jews, Israelites, unclean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. But watch this. And the Messiah saith unto him, See thou tell no man, but go thy way and show thyself to the priests, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. In order for you to be cleansed, you had to come with a gift to the priest. The priest would be the one that cleansed you with your offering. That's the way of the sanctuary. But when we go back to 2 Chronicles, they didn't bring an offering. They didn't go through the priest to be cleansed. Hezekiah just prayed for them. But the point is, brothers and sisters, the point we're making is that Israelites were unclean because of sin. That's why it says in verse 18, for a multitude of the people, even many of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and Issachar, and Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves. They were unclean. Why? Because of sin, iniquity. That's why in Hosea was the prophet at this time. When you understand Hosea, he was the prophet. Hosea 9:3. This is why one of the reasons why they were unclean. Hosea 9:3. They shall not dwell in the Lord's land, but Ephraim, that's northern kingdom, shall return to Egypt, which was Assyria, and they shall eat unclean things in Assyria. So they became unclean by the food and by the sin. That's how they became unclean, by the food and sin of Assyria, by another nation. They became unclean among another nation. So back to 2 Chronicles. Ephraim now, 2 Chronicles 30. We're just showing you that the Israelites could be unclean as well among the nations. 2 Chronicles 30. Verse 18 again, for a multitude of the people, even many of Ephraim. Who went to Assyria? Ephraim. And ate unclean things in Assyria. See, these were the Israelites that came out of the captivity under the Assyrians and went back to the kingdom of Judah. But when they came back to Hezekiah, which still had a kingdom, they were unclean because they were in idolatry. They had eaten unclean foods. But they ate the Passover anyway, otherwise, as it was written. Because, see, they were supposed to offer a gift of cleansing to the priest before they could eat the Passover, but they didn't. Hezekiah did it a different way. He prayed for them, those that were unclean, that God would pardon their sin. But he had to prepare his heart to seek God. That's to keep the law, even though he had not been cleansed according to offerings. So we're showing you that Israelites were unclean. it carries what it carries. So going back, we got to go back to Acts 11, going back to Acts 11 and seeing there is no verse, there is no scriptural support for any other Gentile. Any other Gentile. Now, and again, I got to do it. Let's define Gentile one more time. 1 Corinthians 10. No, 1 Corinthians 12 and 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, Paul's brethren, I will not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. So Paul's brethren, who were Israelites, were Gentiles because of idolatry. Too many places. You won't be able to get by this. That's why it says in Ephesians 4:17, this I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walked. The other Gentiles would be another type of Gentile. And the sin, vanity of your mind. So, again, sin against God, being in idolatry, being unclean. Israelites were Gentiles. No way around it. And going back to the book of Acts, chapter 11, you got to ask yourself a question. Who were the Gentiles in verse 1 that God cleansed? It's easy now. It's easy now. The Gentiles that he cleansed was those scattered Israelites among the nations, not all people. And with that, brothers and sisters, all praises. Without prophecy, don't believe it. Christians manage to do things without the prophecy. The only Gentiles that were to be cleansed were those scattered Israelites among the nations. And with that, we bid you good night. Well, I wouldn't say good night. It's just 5:43. We still have a lot of daylight. We still have 2 more hours of daytime left. So we bid you a good rest of the Sabbath. May it be more peaceful than it was before you heard this. And that the love of God shall increase through you through the law. Love and peace. We'll be back with you. And like I say, brothers and sisters, we're going to go back to the 10-minute podcast episodes. We're going to go back. Give us a little time to get some more subscribers, and we will be back with you. Because, like I said, we made them every day. It was no problem. But love and peace to you, brothers and sisters, here from us at Little Rock, Arkansas, and all praises.